Ladies and gentlemen, friends, good morning. My name is I am the Chief Communications Officer of the United Nations Foundation, and it is a privilege and honor to be here in this home, and we're so grateful to our hosts at UNESCO for welcoming us to the stage. Important conversation for the Earth to Paris who made a global conversation yesterday of everyone's agenda and helped make it not only but a truly impactful one around the world. My some expectations and the flow and the feeling of what will be start the day off with a conversation. Today is intended to be a time for dialogue and interaction. Oftentimes we're invited to meetings where we just listen, and if we're truly in a social and an engaged world, we want to have the chance to interact. You're here because you have voices and audiences and reach and insight that helps make a conversation even richer. So today is intended to be a chance for you to have access to the people who are changing the world for an issue that affects everyone in the world. We'd like to ask and remind everyone to turn off, if you are here in UNESCO with us, joining us in this beautiful venue, turn off your ringer on your cell phone, but we're going to ask you to turn up the volume of its impact. What that means is you're not only welcome to, but expected to be posting and tweeting. Our guests know that if you're not looking at them in the eye, that means you're looking into the eyes of the people who read your blog. You're looking into the eyes of the people who read your Twitter feed and who follow you on Facebook. But we're here to have that interaction. So I want to make sure that that's clear and that our guests and our speakers understand that that's what's happening here. You're on the stage because your voice is as important as anyone's. We also want to acknowledge that we will have some visitors, some of your colleagues and friends, journalists, bloggers, and guests that are coming from other events. So today's flow will be in and out. If you need to depart, please do so. This is the easiest way on or off if you need to. If there's anyone who has a particular question, I'd like you to please ask our co-facilitators for the day. And they are here with us, and I'm going to ask them to stand if they would for a moment. Caleb Tiller with the United Nations Foundation, Corey Frazier with Plus Social Good, and our colleague Armel. Is Armel here with UNESCO? She's going to be joining us. Wave your hand, Armel. Armel's going to be up here on the stage, and we'll do a proper introduction. But if you have any questions, you can see any of us, and we'll make sure that, that we can help address your questions. Let's get to the conversation and the dialogue and introducing our special guests. And for the welcome from our host, I'm going to now pass the microphone and ask to kick us off Kathy Calvin, President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you all for coming back today. I know many of you were with us yesterday in the Petit Palais. It was a great day. This 36-hour surge that you helped us kick off and sustain really led to some amazing conversations overnight. We heard from moms who said, I didn't really ever understand that climate was part of my life, and now it's something I'm talking about on a daily basis with my kids. And scientists in remote locations saying, finally, people are understanding what we've been talking about for years, and the conversation includes us now in a new way. And I just want to say thank you to everybody's creativity. You saw the letter from Earth to Paris, the kind of enthusiasm and creativity, and I think of UNESCO when I think about creativity, that this has spawned and that we hope will be continued as we leave Paris and go back to our day jobs. We need to keep that kind of creativity going so that this issue can stay alive. So hopefully today will be interactive, and we invite all of you to be part of the conversation. And so let me get us started. I just want to give a shout out to one person before we do. It's the birthday of Patty Padilla, who put on today's event and yesterday. So if I just can say happy birthday, Patty, and thank you from all of us. So we're in this beautiful location, UNESCO. UNESCO is 70 years old this year, just as the United Nations is. And so the United Nations was chartered in San Francisco in June of 1945, UNESCO in August of 1945. So I know you had a big celebration here this year. Congratulations. It's the part of the UN that stands for education, culture, and scientific enterprise. And that's just so important as we go forward. We sometimes forget those are the underpinnings of everything we do and all of our work. So it's a real honor to have with us today two of our colleagues from UNESCO. Many of you heard me introduce Irina yesterday, so you know she's from Sofia, Bulgaria, studied in the US and the USSR at that time. Was previously an ambassador to France, Monaco, and to this institution, and now is the Director General since 2009, and just doing a fantastic job. And with us also is Flavia Schlegl. She's a native of Switzerland. She's an MD. She's worked in China, and she's now the Assistant Director General for Science, Natural Sciences. So you have two of UNESCO's best, and we're just going to have a conversation about what we think has been going on here. So if I may just open it up to all of us, you probably have a few things on your mind that you want to say that you've been thinking about. I'm just curious what you've probably been to many COPs before, these conference of parties that gather every year. What's been so different about this one?
Well, thank you very much, Kyte, and thanks to the UN Foundation, and welcome here to UNESCO. As you mentioned, we just celebrated our 70th anniversary, and it was a great moment to throw a light and also on what the achievements of this great organization that promotes cooperation in the education, the sciences, culture, communication, as we call the soft power of the United Nations, so much in need nowadays. And also to think about our relevance today and about the future. And I think UNESCO's mandate is so intertwined with our topic today, speaking about climate change, because I remember my first, and thank you very much for your kind presentation of my being here Director General of UNESCO. In fact, my first encounter with the United Nations and the topic of climate change, protecting of environment, biodiversity, in my capacity of Director General was Copenhagen. I was elected, I took over on the 15th of November immediately. 2 weeks later, I moved to Copenhagen, and as many of you, I think we were disappointed because expectations were so high, and the world did not deliver, the leaders did not deliver. And since then, we, with the United Nations, other agencies and funds, and under a very strong leadership of the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, because I know how committed he is to climate. He convened last year the summit on climate in order to push for the success of this conference here in Paris. And we have been engaging with every COP21, either on the scientific front of mobilizing the scientific community, our outreach. We have UNESCO chairs in maybe more than 150 countries in universities. We have institutes working in this area. We are leading the scientific advisory board with the Secretary General that focused recently on climate change. And also through our protected areas. UNESCO is the organization that has the vastest, the biggest protected areas in the world. I'm speaking about the World Heritage Sites, which are 30% on the list of 1,000 are natural sites, ranging from the Great Barrier Reef to the national parks in Congo, which are on this list, and there are protected areas. Or the biosphere reserves. We have more than 600 biosphere reserves all over the world, which are in the ocean, which are in some of the biggest forests, and we think these are a real laboratory of scientific research, of community engagement, and the way we look at climate is through our very concrete work on the ground. And then, of course, the biggest area nowadays, which I think is relevant to this conference, is about awareness, knowledge, what we called education for sustainable development, because we believe that this awareness and knowledge starts on the benches of schools. If we want to change mentality, and our motto for this conference, COP21, our commitment, our engagement was change mentality, not climate. I think this is a very important part. It should be a very important part of our work. We hope this conference adopts strong decisions, but they have to be implemented. And it is not the end of our quest for sustainability, for protection of our nature, for containment, for the impact. We have to move on, we have to follow, because after this conference, hopefully, there will be strong decisions, as I say, but then they have to be implemented, and it depends on each one of us. Each one on this planet will have a role to play, and we have to raise awareness and educating people for this matter. So, talking about Copenhagen and now here to Paris, I think in some sense we can say that this is already a success to the extent that there were 152 leaders, that there has been a lot of national commitments even before COP21, national commitments from countries all over the world. So already there is this global movement, but this is not the end of it. And I hope that all of us gathered here and all of those who are listening to us, I hope millions will not stop our advocacy, our strong work, our push, but we will just continue even stronger and more convinced, because I believe the science is there. No more excuses.
No more excuses. That's a great rallying cry. And Rachel Kyte is here in the house.
Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm going to turn to Flavia Schlegl next, so you can take a breath, Rachel, and then I'll make your introduction. So Flavia, let me ask you to comment on the science question. You know, I think that has bedeviled this conversation for so long, and yesterday several people, including Tim Wirth, said, you know, that issue is resolved. And I've heard somebody else say this week, the climate deniers are an extinct species. But you've lived in this debate for a long time. How do we think about the science as we try to move forward and have to make change regardless of what we think about the science even?
Well, thank you, Katie, for making me part of this conversation. And I think I just like to go back what you asked, what is actually different here at this COP here in Paris. And I think just an event like this one, the strong presence of social media, I think really is a big difference to COPs before that. And I mean, I'm very happy together, I guess, with the Director General that we can engage in these conversations, because there are many stories to tell. And I think, I mean, we have all the negative and the bad stories, and I'm coming back to the science on that, but there are really many positive stories out there, and I think it's very important that we actually get out the message through also the help of you around here today, that there are also stories to tell which give some hope. Now, coming to the science, we just had yesterday a day-long workshop with IPCC and the 5th assessment report. And I would say now, being responsible for natural sciences, technology and innovation, yes, I would say we have enough knowledge. We know that it is now time to act. And we know also scientifically that there is a point of no return coming rather quickly. And if governments don't take a strong decision, it might be too late. But what is still really something what we have to do is obviously to continue to build on this science base. That's what we do in our science program on ocean, on biodiversity, on fresh water. We really have to make sure that we always have the best knowledge. It's just not enough to know what is around there. But I mean, we have to actually evolve that knowledge as well. And there may be two aspects which are very much important. Now again, speaking from the science base, is very much driven by natural sciences, technology, the hard sciences. But when it comes to climate change, you have many questions which relate to human rights, to ethical concerns and principle. And so with our social and human science programs, we have to make sure that we're not only talking about the hard sciences, but that we're also including appropriately all these questions which relate to justice or human rights. And another important knowledge body, which we should really not forget, and our Director General is really a very strong advocate for that as well, is indigenous and local knowledge. It's very important that, and this was also discussion in IPCC, and in the 5th assessment report, it was actually the first time when the sort of like the global scientific community acknowledged that there is another body of knowledge, which is important, which we have to safeguard. We have to make heard the knowledge of local people, of indigenous people, their views on the world, their views on climate change. They're sitting on this little island somewhere out there in the ocean. They are actually observing how the sand, the beach is getting smaller and smaller. And we had also, again on Sunday, together with our DG and Robert Redford, an afternoon on storytelling from indigenous people. And this is a completely different story, and it's quite a challenge for our regular scientists, including myself, to actually listen to these stories, to understand, to see the worth. And I think this is also something where UNESCO has great programs, sort of like to co-produce, to share all these different bodies of knowledge around there, and to make them available for best solutions depending on local circumstances, because also when it comes to climate change, one size doesn't fit all.
Wow, I love that we have soft science as well as soft power here. This is great. Rachel, Kyte, welcome. I know you've had a crazy week, and so we're grateful you could be here with this interactive group of bloggers who want to hear from you. I asked for just an observation about how this COP21 is different from all other COPs. But let me say 2 seconds about Rachel's bio. She's born in the UK. She was energized to come to the world stage when she was selected as a student delegate to the Cairo Conference on Women in 1995. So she comes from that deep base of belief in women's rights, but has made much of her career about sustainability and climate, and most recently has been the World Bank Group President for climate and the special sustainability and the special envoy for climate. In January, she will take over as the CEO of the new and newly defined initiative, Sustainable Energy for All, which the Secretary General created 3 years ago and is now becoming a new kind of hybrid public-private partnership. So Rachel, congratulations. And over to you to just give us some reflections on the week and perhaps a bit of the look ahead.
This is quite, God forbid we leave here with anything other than a strong agreement. But we have had so many pinch me moments in the last 10 days that, I could fill a book. Things that people were told not to dream about, not to even imagine, not to think would be politically possible, are happening. Things that people said, well, you won't see that for 15 years in the financial sector or in the business sector are happening. I mean, and for those of you in the blogosphere, that for those of you in the Internet of Things, you perhaps won't be surprised by the speed of innovation and change, but I also see that seeping into some of the way in which the potential deal at the end of this week will be framed. So for years, working off this incredibly robust scientific body of evidence, the economics was sort of a bit woolly, or there was room for plausible deniability about the economic decisions that needed to be taken. And over the last few years, the economics has become as firm and as robust as the science. So the science is clear, the economics are compelling. But then the politics has always been difficult. So the science is clear, the economics are compelling, so therefore we need less carbon in the economy. Carbon is killing us. Carbon is negatively priced. We subsidize it. So we make big speeches about how we have to grow green, and then we're busily subsidizing an old economy. We're not incentivizing the new economy. We don't have the ambition to think about the new, bright, clean jobs that will be created from making this transition, and the fact that we will have to support those who are on the back end of the transition to make it through. We will have to be in solidarity with those who are most vulnerable, but we will have to be in solidarity with those that are vulnerable within our own developed economies, for those of us who live in the north, who for generations have had a proud tradition of mining coal or of being in heavy industry without the efficiency that we need now, and who need to be able to imagine that their children and their children's children can have proud traditions and proud careers going forward. So we've made all those speeches, but we never put the economics in place. But now, no matter how difficult it is, we've got people standing up saying, yeah, I put a tax on carbon, and I got re-elected, and I've got revenue, and I'm using that revenue to incentivize cleaner growth. I am going to, I ran on a ticket of building a robust carbon market, and it's growing, and we've got more and more revenue, and now I can use this revenue to offset this or to invest in that or whatever. So you've got Quebec and Ontario and Manitoba trading with California. You've got California negotiating with Mexico. You've got Mexico hooking up with Canada. I mean, if you're in Kansas, you're now surrounded by, carbon markets, carbon taxes, carbon fees, investment in a new, cleaner, greener future. In 2017, China will be the biggest carbon market in the world. All eyes will then shift from Brussels to... These are things that we were told would not happen politically, and yet on Monday, the first Monday, we had heads of state standing on stage saying this is the way we can do it. We can now imagine that a woman in a distant rural village or town, or even in the peri-urban setting of a city in the dry lands of Africa, can get enough watts through off-grid solar battery packs to be able to charge her cell phone, the 3 cell phones of her neighbors, potentially run a sewing machine. She can get a 19-inch television. She can get potentially access to a super efficient refrigerator. She can provide lighting and cooking clean. So she can healthily provide for her family. She can start a small business. And she can be extremely low income and still make that happen, because she can use her cell phone payment plan to pay as she goes, and to suddenly have access to energy, have access to clean energy, and be part of this economic transition. Imagine that she can prosper. She does not have to be a victim of the move to cleaner, greener growth. And we can end poverty, and we can curb climate change. And at moments in the last 10 days, you can politically see the clouds breaking on the horizon. So we know scientifically that's where we need to go. Economically, the message has been increasingly, if you do this, 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 and this, and this, you can start to make that transition. But I've started to see the political clouds breaking now. I don't know what's going to happen on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. But there are coalitions that are strengthening here that I didn't think that I would see. There is a coalition around 1.5 degrees as opposed to 2, which is growing in size every day. Whether it will succeed in some language which raises our ambition, I don't know. But something is going on here, and I think that Paris is listening to the Earth.
Thank you for that pitch at the end. That was lovely. What a vision. That's where we need to go. I could talk to these 3 women all day, but I'm going to invite you to join me now. I'll take about 3 questions just in a row, and then let the panelists answer them, because we have about 10 minutes before we need to move to the next class. So let me see who would like to go first. Yes.
Let me ask a question that might bridge your 2 jobs. I'm Michael Molitor. I'm Chief Scientific Officer at the Climate Bonds Initiative. We did a simple calculation, and the ratio of money chasing high carbon investment to low carbon investment is about 40-1 today across capital markets. You're part of the World Bank. You guys initiated this, got us started on green bonds. That ratio is getting better, but of course we're running a race. Right? our organization is trying to create a global standard by which climate bonds are going to be certified, right? Do you see anything happening here in all this excitement in terms of the things that you're seeing, these pinch me moments, that suggests that governments may be willing to accelerate the process by which capital markets direct significantly more money to decarbonization?
Great question. Second one? Yes. Identify yourself if you would too, please. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Emma Hutchinson. I'm a Stanford student here working with Conergy. And my question is specifically for Rachel Kyte, but looking for answers from everyone if you have a response. I know that in the past, especially in Peru, we've seen the relationship between developed and developing countries at the COP negotiations changing very, very much. From the beginning, from 1992 in Rio, it's just completely done a 180. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how you've noticed them changing, specifically at COP21, and how this will affect the future going forward.
Great, Emma. Thank you. And one last question. All right. I'm going to let the panel address those too, because I think there's some rich stuff there. And Rachel, why don't you go first, but then I know we want to hear from Irina and Flavia as well.
Thank you. So on the financial markets, I think that there were a couple of announcements before we arrived at COP, which were, for me, pivotal. The announcement that there will be this working group between the Bank of England and China in the run-up to the Chinese G20, looking at the financial risk, the climate risk in the financial system. And that's up to a letter that was written by the French Finance Minister Sapin earlier this year to the FSB, which is the Financial Stability Board. So the story here is that the understanding of the risk of an excessive investment in carbon in a world where carbon is the commodity or the currency that we're trying to wean ourselves off, that's gone from being some, fringe discussion that a few sort of NGO boffins were having a few years ago with a few people inside multilateral financial institutions and other, the odd person lurking around in the corridors of a Wall Street or London-based bank, to being a mainstream conversation. So you've got the divestment movement on the one hand, and you've got the campaigning, and then all the way over here you've got basically a working group of the FSB reporting to the G20. I think that our understanding of that will be profound. And then you link that up to the amount of assets which are now going to be managed in a different way. The portfolio decarbonisation project, which was announced only in September 2014, leading insurance companies and others that said that they would decarbonise their portfolios. They hoped that they would be at 100 billion by Paris. They're at 600 billion yesterday and growing. Huge announcements from some of the really big insurance companies and asset owners. And then yesterday we had a meeting with large commercial banks, all of the multilateral development banks, and a number of the bilateral financial institutions, announcing how we were going to be managing our risk and working together to calculate impacts. And we calculated in order to, just before we had the meeting, that the people in the room that were announcing that they would work in this way accounted for $11 trillion worth of assets. We were told then last night that the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank will join these when it becomes operational in January. So this is going to Emma, this is the flat world that's beginning to emerge. I don't think this world is really represented yet in the negotiations. There are very real historic reasons why Isabella Teixeira has the most difficult job of all, the Minister of Environment from Brazil, who has to negotiate this complex issue of differentiation. The roles and responsibilities of the developed world versus the roles and responsibilities of the emerging world. I don't think it's completely, it doesn't yet completely reflect how financial markets work, how investments work, where capital is moving, where people are moving, and the creative destruction capacity, the leapfrogging capacity that the developing world has in energy and transport and farming and things like this. But it's a much more nuanced table in the negotiation rooms than we've ever been able to see before.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I just like to pick up on one comment that Rachel made, and then on one of the questions, and one is the science to action gap. Obviously, there is enough science there. We know about the economics, but do we actually now act with a final agreement? I think this is also where UNESCO is very proactive when it comes. How does this get this? How is this knowledge get across? How it is it communicated, and where do you get it to? I mean, if governments should act, then obviously it's up to the citizens also to put some pressure on those governments. So we're talking about education, and I mean just very practical what UNESCO is doing also in education for sustainable development. Just for example, the development of curricula, or to teach teachers, to train teachers how actually to talk about climate change and its impact to students. I think that's a very important one. Or also now talking again about media and social media or traditional media like newspapers. Our sector for communication and information is really working hard also to promote public awareness. And for example, there is just one example on a handbook produced by UNESCO on climate change for journalists in Africa. So also to empower the journalists actually to talk through their whatever traditional or new media to their public. Then the comment I'd like to make is on the economic argument. What we're trying to do, and the DG mentioned our biosphere reserves network, there we really want to show as well that you actually can try to conserve your biodiversity, to protect your land, but that this is also an economic chance, that we could have low emission biosphere reserves and the families living on the biosphere reserves but also outside the biosphere reserves. They can actually make money out of that. They can make clean money out of that. And I would like actually to team up also with the World Bank to try to find solution on these very local economic markets, to have models, how you can actually interact, how you can have a clean economy on the local protective land, which also will make sure that also in the future we can live on our great biodiversity.
I would like to follow on the second question put here in continuation of what Rachel and Flavia said. I think there is a big shift, the question about developing countries and their approach, and I think there is a big shift if you compare to Copenhagen or even before, because I believe the developing countries are seeing on one side, I'm talking about the small island development states or some others who are really suffering in Africa, in the Sahel, or some others who are very, very cognizant and big also campaigners to tackle the issue of climate change. On the other side, we have the emerging economies who have seen the benefits, and Rachel said it, on investing in green economies. Morocco has the ambition to become the biggest solar providers on solar energy in the world. Costa Rica already have 98% yesterday. I was told of the clean energy received in the countries. And there are many, many others who are just getting on board with this. What I believe is very important from this political debate, and then looking at economics, we have two agendas now, world agendas, I would say, led by the United Nations. Agenda 2030, adopted for sustainable development, adopted in September by the General Assembly, and now the possible strong, good commitment and decisions of the COP21. I believe it is key to have this, to consider these two agendas as one. I think we should not look at them separately. I think it is really critical to look at one. If we want to have to eliminate extreme poverty, which is the agenda until 2030, or to have the energy security, water, food security, urban development, you name it, all the 17 development goals. we cannot detach them from climate change. This means that if we want to have energy security or food security or eliminate poverty, just to cite but a few, we have to look at them from the perspective also and point of view of decisions on climate, carbon emissions and all this. This means that, and I think what Rachel said was very important, business is shifting, economies are shifting. We need to have a kind of a, what I would call the shortcut towards green development. We don't want to stop the development of countries, on the contrary. We want to promote it, we want to raise the standards of living, we want to eliminate poverty, we want to have more social inclusion, we want to have more equity in development, both among the regions and within the countries. But we don't want them to go the, so to say, classical way, to make all this big turn, and with the, once again, I would say, the damage to the climate. This is not an option anymore. We have to help them make a shortcut towards green development, green economies, and achieve the same sustainable development goals, but in a different manner. So I think this is very important. If we combine these two agendas, then I think we may be successful, and it is happening, but we have to accelerate this, and we have to look at it from a different optics.
Well, please join me in thanking these three great women experts. Excellent start to our day. Thank you.